Somehow, Bristlefrost returned. So back when Warrior Cats first teased Super Editions 17 and 18, I made a huge leap in logic to determine that I thought Bristlefrost would be returning. And there is so much in that video that is just complete nonsense watching it today. But my prediction that Super Edition 17 would be an Ivypool Super Edition came true. And in this Ivypool's heart, Bristlefrost did return. So it aged pretty well in that regard. In my original video, I said two things needed to be true in order for Bristlefrost to come back. One, that there was a way to twist the circumstances of Bristlefrost's death for her to still be around. And two, that the writing team was so passionate about Bristlefrost that they would want to write about her again. I think ultimately, both came true. I thoroughly proved the second point in my original video, and given Ivypool's heart's main emotional conflict was surrounding Ivypool's grief for Bristlefrost, it just further proves the point that the writing team loves Bristlefrost. Point 1, I also tried to prove, and I did come up with one way to twist the narrative for Bristlefrost to still be around. Ultimately, it was extremely unlikely for me to predict the exact idea the writing team had, so my idea was completely different from the book, but I was right about one thing. Roll the clip. The Warrior Cats writers have the power to write anything in the books regardless of how much or little it makes sense, if they simply want to. The writing team has made point number 1 come true, because they indeed changed the lore of the entire series on the spot to make Bristlefrost's return possible. So for this video, I want to dive into 3 topics. 1. What are these lore changes? 2. Plot holes created by these lore changes. And 3. Is the book good enough to justify the lore changes? So, what happened? Well, the Wildcats happened. They are a whole new species of cat introduced to the Warriors universe through Ivypool's heart, most likely to be Scottish Wildcats, in my opinion. But the exact subspecies isn't important to the lore. What is important is that they have a new belief system that is different from StarClan, the Tribe of Endless Hunting, the Sisters, anything that came before. In the StarClan system, a cat dies, they become a spirit who watches over the living cats, and if they are eventually forgotten by the living cats, the spirit fades away, completely gone. The Wildcat system, they still have spirits, but instead of fading to nothing after being forgotten, they simply become a part of nature. In all the beauty in nature, our ancestors showing their love to the cats. But then it's revealed that these are not different systems at all spirit worlds are interconnected, and the part about becoming nature is true for StarClan cats as well. Stripestar and some StormClan cats become part of nature, but Galestar spreading his memory to the living cats force him back to spirit form, basically unfading him, and he says the following about being nature. I was kind of everywhere, I suppose. I was part of the wind, the grass, the trees, everything. I wasn't watching over the clans like StarClan was, but I was aware of them. It was sort of wonderful. So basically it's an abstract state of being that's described as a positive experience. And of course, what Stripestar describes is revealed to be Bristlefrost's fate as a fated spirit. Bristlefrost throughout the book appears in many ways, sometimes through dreams, and sometimes as just nature and the beauty of it. The Warrior Cats writers wanted to make it so clear that Bristlefrost is part of nature, that at the end of the book, they break all rules of Warrior Cats lore, so Bristlefrost can talk in Ivypool's head, and later appear in spirit form in a dream shared by Rootspring and Ivypool, where she says, "You haven't lost me, I'm everywhere, you only need to look for me." And after this dream, in the waking world, she shows off her nature spirit form, sending a magnificent white stag that even has frosty antlers to symbolize Bristlefrost, and a gaze that reminded Ivypool of how Bristlefrost would look at her. Bristlefrost is that deer, but she's also the water, the grass, the sky, and so on. She is everywhere. And this is all very heartwarming, but I just want to take a bit to reflect on the fact that Warrior Cats lore was already being held together with duct tape and rubber bands before this. Now it's in shambles. Here are a list of plot holes I could find in Ivypool's heart alone. Being a fated cat is described as wonderful in order to drive home the fact that Bristlefrost is happy now, Well then why is unfading the StormClan cats the goal of the quest? If it's so wonderful being faded, why is the destruction of the clans in a river of blood the consequence for not undoing it? If the ultimate end for spirits is for them to become nature, why is there a bunch of randoms haunting a Thunderpath? It's a lot of cats, so it has to go back many years. Wouldn't they be forgotten and therefore faded? In this book, the StarClan cats admit they forgot about StormClan due to the memories of StormClan disappearing when it was forgotten by the living cats. But then how does Galestar still remember? Wouldn't that mean StormClan isn't forgotten, and should therefore still be around? If the spirit worlds are all connected by a stream, then why did Ashfur clogging up the tunnels cause them to lose their connection in the broken code? Couldn't they just ride the stream to a different realm and connect to living cats from there? If Bristlefrost and Stripestar were both in the exact same form as a part of nature, why can Stripestar return but Bristlefrost can't? Like I know the reasoning in the book is that Bristlefrost dying in the Dark Forest makes it permanent, but why? Before now, fading was permanent regardless. Does the Dark Forest plant a curse on her? Also, Spotted-Leaf, Tigerstar, Hawkfrost, and Brokenstar technically died in the living world. Why didn't they respawn? If living cats need to remember a cat for them not to fade, how are Dawn of the Clan cats still in StarClan? Like seriously, no one could possibly have passed along their memory for that long. Even if you argue that an original leader like Riverstar is being remembered so long as RiverClan remains a thing, how do you explain Greywing not being faded? The living cats never mention him. How is he still being remembered? StormClan needed Galestar's help to be unfaded, but in Omen of the Stars, the ancients unfaded themselves, with some wacky reincarnation and time travel shenanigans. Why didn't StormClan do that? The staying in the memory of living cats to avoid fading can be easily exploited. Like a spirit only needs to walk in the dreams of a cat once or twice, and they bought themselves so much time while that cat remains alive. Yellowfang could be a spirit forever just by always being in cats' dreams. It's just a mess. But I also understand that the average reader is not thinking about all these circumstances so closely, and the authors probably would consider telling a good story higher priority than focusing on all these smaller details. Which brings about my final topic. Is the moral of the book good enough to justify the lore changes? Ivypool's emotional journey begins with her shut off from other cats and her grief, and only confiding in Rootspring, and it ends with her having a new perspective on the fate of Bristlefrost and appreciation for the beauty of nature. And I think the best thing the book does is the growth that happens between Ivypool, Rootspring, and Deathwing. In the beginning, Ivypool very outwardly chooses Rootspring as her source of comfort over Deathwing, because Rootspring understands the pain of losing Bristlefrost, whereas Deathwing can only draw from losing Birchkit. Ivypool is not okay with Deathwing comparing their losses, because Ivypool will never see Bristlefrost in StarClan, while Deathwing will eventually live with Birchkit in StarClan, diminishing Deathwing's loss due to her much greater loss. And the eventual message here is that two things can be said. Ivypool eventually does feel for Deathwing, and it doesn't matter who had the worst loss. They're just two sisters that have to be there for each other. So when Ivypool does visit StarClan briefly, she makes sure that Birchkit is doing well as a gesture of gratitude for her sister, who was also there when she needed her. And another important step for Ivypool is letting go of Rootspring. In her mind, she sort of imposes this role on him to be responsible for keeping the memory of Bristlefrost alive, meeting up with him often to talk about Bristlefrost. She is very unsure if she would be comfortable with him becoming mates with another cat later on, because that would contribute to Bristlefrost being forgotten. But ultimately, Ivypool has to face the fact that Rootspring is still so young and has so much opportunity in his life beyond just being her personal therapist. And she has to let him go. Stop the overly frequent meetings, because they both have a future with completely different paths. And Ivypool has family and friends within ThunderClan who have been waiting for her to give them the time. She has Fernsong, she has Thriftier and Flipcaw, and that's just the beginning. So the exploration of grief here, I really liked. But there was also some touching on spirituality, specifically the idea to broaden your perspectives. What you believe about life and death and afterlife can change over time. This goes back to the lore changes I talked about for most of this video, Ivypool coming to realize that faded spirits are never truly gone, and I think the book does a good job of warming the reader up to the change over time, rather than throwing it down all at once. First we see the sisters who reject the idea that a spirit is gone for good, and suggest there are many forms a spirit can take. Then Ivypool sees a trace of Bristlefrost while dreaming. Rootspring mentions how he has memories of his future with Bristlefrost as if it actually happened, which is a callback to the ending of A Light in the Mist. A bit of a side theory here, but if Bristlefrost is a nature spirit becoming part of the earth, and Rootspring's special power is sensing the earth, it seems very likely that Bristlefrost would be responsible for sending these memories to him. Then Stalkpur is eventually who breaks through to Ivypool. This conversation is the one that spells out the intended moral the most. Stalkpur points out all the new things Ivypool experienced on the journey she never knew existed, and how in a similar sense, the afterlife could have aspects to it that she never knew existed. So this is all a really good message about considering new perspectives, right up until one slight problem. Despite Ivypool being taught to be skeptical about her preconceived notions, there is zero consideration that the Wildcats could also get something wrong. And rather than Ivypool becoming more open-minded, she instead simply jumps ship and clings to the idea that the Wildcats are 100% right. And I don't blame her, because Bristlefrost just shows up and talks to her. Like, it feels like they were trying to make some sort of message about religion, but when they make their spiritual beliefs either 100% correct or 100% wrong, it immediately stops being anything close to religion, because the nature of religion is more subjective and abstract. They were so close to making the nature spirit concept abstract, and then they ruined it by making Bristlefrost say "what's up," and Stripestar saying, "so this is what happened." So, exploring Ivypool's grief. That was written well. The nature spirit thing, there were some good ideas in there, and touching moments, but ultimately it had some flaws. So I would say the book is good, but had the lore changes been handled differently, I think it still would have been good. It's good because of Ivypool and her relationships, not for any of the wacky spirit lore they added. I think Bristlefrost being around in some form is cool, because I like Bristlefrost. I wouldn't take that away, but the writing surrounding it just could have been stronger. So, yeah. New lore for Warrior Cats. This cannot be undone. Alright, bye everyone.